Alex Epstein, author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, has delivered another knockout punch against the green ideology, aptly entitled Fossil Future. Why global human flourishing requires more oil, more coal, and natural gas, not less. Epstein's new work includes the comprehensive factual case for fossil fuels as he presented it in his earlier book. He then proceeds to eviscerate the mental framework behind the war on fuel. Now, Epstein begins his discourse by identifying the knowledge system being used to perpetrate the anti-carbon crusade. And this book is available on Amazon as we are showing you now, so please go pick it up. He then very reasonably states that any judgment regarding the positive or negative nature of any phenomenon, including fossil fuel use, should include consideration of both its pluses and its minuses. He then describes the extraordinary positive impact of fossil fuel use on development and maintenance of modern civilization. In particular, he focuses on the unprecedented gains in health, productivity, education, mobility, safety, lifespans, leisure time, living standards, environmental quality, and practically any other index of human well-being one could mention, is all as a result of fossil fuels. And he does this with the help of a series of graphs that will follow. In Figure 1, he shows that far from causing a climate catastrophe, fossil fuel use has virtually ended all climate catastrophes, with the number of climate-related deaths falling 98% in the last century alone. Epstein says this is due to not any marked improvement in the climate, but rather to increased societal resiliency as a result of our growing fossil fuel-enabled technological powers. For example, deaths due to extreme temperatures have been greatly reduced through effective home heating and air conditioning, and deaths due to famine have been virtually eliminated by both the abundance of produced by fossil fuel-driven fertilized and irrigated agriculture, but by modern society's fossil fuel-enabled ability to rapidly transport food around the world. In addition, he says CO2 enrichment of the atmosphere has accelerated the rate of plant growth worldwide, confirmed by NASA, by the way. It's true, as shown by NASA satellite data. He could also have mentioned that warming has expanded the growing season, as shown by the EPA data. Climate alarmists never mention this, ever, even though it's the strongest proof of the reality of warming. Guess why not? Well, because increased greening means that warming helps the planet, and they're trying to tell you that the planet is about to die. Now let's get on to Figure 2. In Figure 2, Epstein shows the improvement of U.S. air quality due to fossil fuel-driven technology progress. Take a look. Here's the graph. Humans require fire to live, by the way. Even Homo erectus used fire hundreds of thousands, 500,000 years ago. Prior to the advent of fossil fuels, humans everywhere used wood as their primary fuel for cooking and heating. Wood smoke, which is filled with tar vapors, is far more polluting than fossil fuel smoke. Consequently, those places that remain biomass dependent for fuel have by far the worst air quality on the entire planet. And their inhabitants are susceptible to very serious health problems as a result. Epstein also discusses the fossil fuel-enabled general availability of clean water to the vast majority of the world's population for the first time in human history, just within recent decades. Oddly, he fails to discuss one of the most profound environmental improvement technologies enabled by fossil fuels: automobiles. Before the advent of automobiles, the streets of major cities were virtually sewers of horse manure, and they stank to high heaven as a result. Well-organized cities employed large numbers of street sweepers and tried to keep the problem under control through menial labor. But I do digress. Poorly organized cities had streets filled with dung. This is why ancient Roman sidewalks were set to so high above the street level, because the sewers were much lower. Thomas Edison even was driven to invent the electric car by the need to get the horses out of the city. So the electric car was invented at the same time as the internal combustion engine, but they went with fossil fuels because it was cheap and readily available, just like today. Can you believe that? The Ford Motor Company grew to become a manufacturer of practical and affordable automobiles, finally solving in the process the problem of gross urban pollution and driving down U.S. air emissions since the 70s. Well, that's because of human ingenuity. Now, in the graphs shown in Figure 3, we will link you below to the article we're talking about tonight. Epstein presents hockey sticks, just like the one provided by Michael Mann, showing how GDP per capita and human life expectancy have shot up. The exact opposite of Michael Mann's graph, which says we're all going to die. Simultaneously, with an exponential increase in fossil fuel use, life expectancy, world population, GDP, all went up. And that's all about to end if, in fact, we transition to the new green destruction, stupidity, polluting narrative. Period. Now, to be real, or to obscure the issue, a denier of the benefits of carbon or fossil fuels might argue that the simultaneous nature of these trends is just coincidental. But Epstein shows that this is nonsense, listing the numerous ways that fossil fuels have served to increase both GDP, including everything we use, which is both produced, transported, all using fossil fuels. So none of these millennials who are throwing paint on Van Goghs or gluing their hands to the streets have ever thought of the fact that if they eliminate fossil fuels, that their standard of living would tank by 90%. Yes, we are not in a current situation to replace all those fossil fuels with renewable energy. And the fact that renewable energy absorbs so much energy in general, mining lithium and cobalt and other things for batteries and photovoltaics. Did you know photovoltaics require oil and gas? So how are we going to get the solar in the future if we don't have oil and gas? Query me that. Fossil fuels have served to increase both GDP and lifespan, scientific knowledge, and environmental quality, all enabled by fossil fuels. Still, Epstein's graphs are hard to read and misleading in a way that weakens his argument, because they imply that GDP per capita and lifespans are increasing as a function of time, rather than a function of fossil fuel use. If these benefits are graphed against fossil fuel use, the causal relationship will literally jump out at you. For example, the next graph, boom. I show the average global GDP per capita in 2020 dollars, graphed against carbon use. It would have been more powerful to present the case in this way. The more carbon we use, the higher the GDP. That's how it works. So once we cut off GDP, once we cut off carbon, guess what happens? We drop down into the sinkhole. Nevertheless, Epstein's points should be clear enough to anyone who is not a reality denier. Having presented this compelling material, he comes back to his central question. Does the anti-carbon knowledge system, quote unquote, properly counterpose the punitive benefits of fossil fuel elimination against the loss of the spectacular benefits of fossil fuel use? Or does it counterpose the punitive benefits of fossil fuel elimination against the denial of such benefits to the billions of people who have yet to experience them? And what I mean by that, if you don't know, if you're not following us, is that 60 to 70% of the world is not benefiting the way the first world is. They are still in poverty. So the last thing they want to support is the Green New Deal. They want the fossil fuels so that their graph can go up, like ours has. So where do we go from here? Clearly, the answer to the second question is no. Therefore, the anti-carbon knowledge system cannot be trusted. Greta Thunberg, are you kidding me? And yet, despite inaccuracy and obfuscation, the knowledge system persists worldwide. It's called brainwashing, and it's being perpetrated by the media worldwide. Since 2012 in the U.S. and the Smith Modernization Act, the CIA and the FBI or any governmental group can infiltrate the media and tell them what to say, period. They have no recourse. So where do we go from here? Well, for starters, this information brainwashing, disinformation campaign, well, it parades around quote unquote designated experts to certify its views. It's worth noting, however, that the figureheads of the movement, or quote unquote the experts, are often inconsequential players in the ongoing scientific debate, like Michael Mann, who's been sued on numerous occasions and has lost because he cannot provide data for his hockey shtick. Many others are ideologues more than anything else. In addition to providing a few delightfully loony quotes from Bill McKibben and other leading current celebrities of the climate change tribe, like Greta Thunberg, Epstein homes in on Paul Ehrlich, the author of The Population Bomb. This might seem like an odd choice. While Ehrlich is still alive and a eugenicist, his days at Methuselian late-night TV show Rockstar Guest ended half a century ago. However, Epstein's target is apt, since it was Ehrlich who formulated the equation that provides the mathematical bedrock of the modern anti-human movement. Ehrlich's equation draws up in conjunction with his student John Holdren, who subsequently became President Obama's science advisor, is I equals P times A times T, where I is impact, P is population, A is affluence, and T is technology. So apparently they want to reduce population, affluence, and technology to equal I. Apart from P, population, none of the factors in the equation are defined quantitatively. But put that aside for a moment. The equation is pure nonsense. In the first place, it assumes that human impact on the environment is, by definition, bad. There is no basis for that, even if one improperly disregards human flourishing as a priority, when in fact we have, based on all the graphs. Burning fossil fuels has made us smart, independent, and technological. So we know that. But for example, if humans drain a swamp, to suppress malaria mosquitoes, their actions will benefit the health not only of humans, but also that of birds and mammals in the area that are also plagued by insect-borne diseases. Furthermore, advancing technology does not, in general, increase human environmental impact. In fact, the opposite is true. For a given amount of food produced, farmers create much less environmental impact than do hunter-gatherers. Those who mine coal or drill for petroleum tax natural ecosystems, much less do those who cut down forests or hunt whales. It's much more damaging. And nuclear energy reduces the tax to near zero. So these discussions need to be had because they are currently being hidden. High technology energy sources draw on resources that are little used, such as natural gas, or not used as all, such as uranium. We're shutting down nuclear power plants today. But I do digress. So really, Ehrlich's equation is not science at all. Rather, it's just a statement that anything humanity does is bad and that human happiness, capability, population growth should be constrained as much as possible to save the Earth. The only problem with that is the Earth has been around for billions of years. Humans have been around for a mere millisecond in their ingenuity to pollute the planet. So what all of these ideologues are saying is moot, which means non-discussable. Many people think moot means something else, when moot in reality means there is no discussion, you are wrong. And they are wrong. Epstein counterposes this worldview to a human flourishing framework that leads to a diametrically opposed conclusion. Fossil fuels are good. Climate alarmists are bad. Ultimately, his argument is about pro-human versus anti-human ethical frameworks, not about the pluses and minuses of fracking and photovoltaic technology. As he writes, one giveaway of both elements of the anti-impact framework is any kind of claim about how the planet has way too many people. That's just a fabricated narrative. We probably already exceeded the planet's carrying capacity by a factor of 8, commenting that such a statement reveals a deep saturation in the delicate nurturer assumption, as well as a callous disregard for the value of human life. To casually talk about billions of people as if their lives were a bad thing is not something someone on the human flourishing framework would do, like us here at Magnetic Reversal News. So the people that are being propped up in this Green New Deal are literally murderers and eugenicists, nothing different than Hitler and the Nazi regime, which many people claim they are. In fact, Epstein maintains a cool tone and a tight focus in his book on practical ethics and on how it applies to the current debate on fossil fuels versus net zero. And if you didn't get the memo, net zero means no people. Oddly, for someone with a philosophical background, he does not discuss the theological and philosophical foundation for the drive of Western civilization to pursue technologically virtuosity to free humanity from brute oil, because there is none. That impulse, based on Judeo-Christian ideas of humans, is made in the image of God, or as children of God, with the inherent right and obligation to continue the work of creation through their divine grant of dominion over nature. This long predates the advent of fossil fuel technology. And as a result of this drive, medieval Europe was highly mechanized, with water and wind put to work to replace physical labor wherever feasible, just like today. For example, the Doomsday Book lists over 10,000 water-driven flour mills and sawmills in Norman, England. But by the middle of the High Middle Ages, the undersides of practically every river bridge in France were filled end to end with water wheels to exploit the hydromechanical energy of these grinding systems. The limit being reached, French tinkerers greatly expanded Europe's energy resources in the 12th century by inventing the post-windmill. Harnessing wind energy posed a more difficult challenge than capturing water energy because wind changes direction. And exploiting the wind required the innovation of a control system that would automatically turn a windmill face the wind. Then, with the invention of the fully rigged sailing ship, Europeans gained access to many of the world's natural and artificial resources. This technological-oriented and enabled society then proceeded to radically expand its energy resources further through the introduction of fossil fuels. It wasn't wind and mechanical, alternative, sustainable sources that made us productive. It was the introduction of fossil fuels that initiated the Industrial Revolution, not the latter. So that should leave you pause. Why are we recapturing an ancient technology that didn't work and we're claiming it works? Well, because it might be nefarious. Epstein does not explore how ideas such as carrying capacity that are generated by the anti-impact framework have repeatedly served as the ideological basis for some of the most horrific crimes of the past 2 centuries. These have ranged from the Malthusian administration of famine in Ireland to the Nazi hunger plan, designed to eliminate most of the population of Eastern Europe, including the Balkans, to population control programs funded by the U.S. State Department and imposed on developing nations as a condition for giving them foreign aid. Well, it just makes the eugenics program in modern days more obvious. I always wondered why, when I was a child, there were millions of people starving in Africa. And just 10 years later, as an adult, I realized there was enough food to feed 3 times the population. It's because of control. It's because of very sick individuals that control the system that we live in that starve people on purpose for profit. It's anti-humanism. It's murder. It's depopulation. And it's been going on for centuries. And that is a boom. Hope you got something out of the video. The people that you've relied on in all of your governments and all of societies for time immemorial have been trying to kill us all off and pretend they're our friends. If you haven't gotten the memo, we just gave it to you. Are you picking it up? We just put it down. And that is a eugenics boom. Do not eat the GMO food. Grow your own and be safe.